Welcome back to the center of it all. Comedian and owner of Wisecrackers Comedy Club, Scott Bruce, stopped by the studio, and John Stroh sat down to talk to him about his life in comedy.
Comedian Scott Bruce has been entertaining audiences for decades, both on the stage and with his business, Wisecrackers Comedy Club. Now, with 5 locations throughout central and eastern Pennsylvania, Wisecrackers has become a success, and Bruce talked about the origins of the club.
Wisecrackers came to be because I was traveling a lot on the road, and we moved back to the Poconos from New York City when my children were born, and my wife was looking for a part-time job, and I said, well, let's just open one little weekend comedy club, and you can run the club, and once or twice a year I'll be able to come home and work in my own club, and that gives me 2 more weeks a year at home, and it'll be a nice little side business for us. Well, it did. It worked out really well, and pretty soon some people from a neighboring town came and said, can we open a Wisecrackers too? And I thought, well, how much harder can 2 be? Really a lot harder. And it grew from there, and we have like 4 or 5 now. And it's a nice little side business.
When it comes to comedians, don't let the small town setting fool you. Wisecrackers brings in big city talent.
And you're going to see the almost exact same show that you would see if you stopped by at a comedy club in Cleveland, or for that matter in Des Moines, or in Austin, Texas. It doesn't matter. These are the same comics that are traveling around the country. And there are different levels of comedians. Now, you know, there are the superstars that we all know. There are the Robin Williams and those guys. And then there are like the very next step down. That's who you're seeing. My comedians, for instance, when I first started bringing comedians around to different places, nobody knew who Ray Romano was. Nobody knew who Tim Allen was. They were all comedians, Rosie O'Donnell. They all worked on the same circuit as I have spent my life working on. And then, you know, you get your break, and how much you make of it is how much you make of it.
Bruce takes pride that Wisecrackers brings more than laughs to the community.
We do fundraisers, hundreds and hundreds of them, literally, at all my clubs. And these fundraisers are for the local basketball team and the local cheerleaders and the Lions Club and the Moose Lodge and all these different organizations, the Elks, obviously. We are able to raise quite a bit of money in the community, and that kind of it not only is very feel-good for us that we're doing something for the community, but it's also very much appreciated by the community that we're doing something that gets them so involved and gives back to the community.
For most people, running a string of comedy clubs would be enough, but Bruce still spends the majority of his time touring as a stand-up comic and spoke about what drew him to the stage decades ago.
Well, I went down to the 7-Eleven and I made a left. I don't know, how did I find my way into comedy? I guess I was dropped on my head a lot as a child. It's one of those things that, you know, when you're growing up, you find out that when people laugh, it really makes you feel good, and, you know, you want to do it more and more. And I just think that I do remember as a very young child watching the comedians on Ed Sullivan and Johnny Carson and thinking, wow, what a great job. And then just one day I decided to do it.
Bruce talked about the eclectic combination of influences behind his comedy.
I think Jack Benny was a genius. I think Richard Pryor was a genius. You can't get much further apart than those 2 comedians. I mean, I absolutely am enamored with W.C. Fields and Groucho Marx and George Carlin and Lenny Bruce, and they're all bring something different to the table. I mean, they are so different as performers. If you do a Lenny Bruce routine, you're going to recognize it immediately as a Lenny Bruce routine. Same with Carlin or Groucho or any of those guys. So,
connecting with an audience is an essential part of almost any performance, regardless of venue.
Different audiences have completely different flavors. If you're working at a college and you're working to a bunch of 18 to 21-year-old kids, it's a completely different show than if you're working at a senior citizen center or if you're working at a retirement. Conversely, Las Vegas, although subtly, is completely different from Atlantic City. You'd think they'd be very similar, but they're 2 very different mentalities. Different comedy clubs, different audiences, all have their own flavor, and even among them, you have to feel out the audience. Fortunately, if you're like on a comedy club at Wisecrackers, for instance, you're going to have 3 comedians, and if you're the headliner, you can watch the MC and the middle and see get a feel for the crowd, so that you're ready to come out guns blazing, because you know what motions and what things to say to make that connection as quickly as possible.
With a career spanning 3 decades, Bruce let us in on his most memorable moment.
The best moment I ever got back, I remember I'd finished a show and an audience member had come up to me after the show to thank me and say he had a great time. And he said, listen, I've just had a terrible week. He said, I lost my job this week. My wife left me this week. He said, everything's going wrong this week. And he said, for the last hour, I forgot about all that, and I want to thank you. Is there a better compliment in the world? So yeah, that is what makes you feel really good about what you do.
And as for the future?
It's a really hard question to answer, because if we go heavier with Wisecrackers, I could see opening a lot more rooms. But remember, I still make my living out on the road, and I really do enjoy my job. So I don't know. In my business, one of the things that you always hope for is I'm going to be the one who gets the next big break. They're going to ask me to be the wacky neighbor on Three's Company or whatever, some TV show or something. So you always have hope that there will be something along those lines. Although I don't hope for the big fame and stardom thing. I'm old enough and comfortable enough with myself now that I actually don't want the craziness. But, you know, who would turn down the money?
That's all the time I got. I'm Scott Bruce. Thank you!
Thanks, John, and thanks to all of you for watching The Center of It All. For more on this show, check out our website at WHVL.com, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. From all of us here at WHVL, I'm Tara Berardi. Have a great day.